Welcome back to Reynolds Runabouts, everybody. This is Jeffrey Reynolds. In this episode, we are going to cover how I fix the smaller holes in the hull from the inside caused by fasteners straining too much against a thin substrate to just some rot that was found under the stringers. So let's get to work. I am back today to work on some small repair areas on this hull before I put the Smith's penetrating epoxy sealer on. A couple areas that I noticed after I sanded, and you'll always see things after you sand, is down here, it's not the keelson, it's almost like the, this is the stem, and then it moves down, and there would have been a knee, this is the foot. So this stem foot area was part of the boat when the man or woman bought this hull, and this would have been already in place, and it's delaminated. That was a area where the water collected, and it simply just had stain and varnish on it, so it was not prepared properly for what was going to be in there, meaning water. So water damage is minimal. There was a few layers of delamination right here at the butt joint of where the keelson meets, and the builder had put in, you see the shellac right there at the butt joint. That did okay. It would have been used as bedding compound for that whole keel area or keelson. And then here, the manufactured part delaminated. So what I'll do, I'll go in there with a utility knife and just cut those loose layers of plywood away. And then I will build that up a bit with some epoxy to make sure that the remaining plywood is solid, at least connected to each other. And that'll give us a nice area. That'll be under a floorboard, so it'll have to be protected like you're not going to see it again. And that's what we're going to do. And then there are little areas like this. There was a fastener there, or maybe got a little too much torque or something that delaminated. But right across the boat is another area that water got in and sat on top of that stringer and then worked its way down and rotted it. Other than that, it's in great shape. I'm got a few holes. I wouldn't say holes, they're just delaminated area there. One here in the stern, another one over on the port, and I will just go ahead and just do thickened epoxy patches there and just get that nice and fair. So when we do put the Smith's penetrating epoxy sealer on, CPS, that will combine well with the patch, and then I'll go ahead and put on Kirby's paint company Chris Craft Bilge red, which is pretty normal for this era boat. It will be thicker than the stain. It'll avoid a varnish coat, and it'll give the boat a whole lot more protection that it probably could have used even in the 1960, maybe avoided some of the issues I'm going to have to fix. So I think it'll give it a nice polished look, even though very little of it will be seen when the boat has its interior and decks on. It will protect the boat for water areas that aren't being seen a lot, and it'll also give it a nice finished look as we put the boat back together. And then the areas you can see, it'll always be nice to see a nice coat of red paint back there. So back to work. Because the hull's kind of shaky and getting a camera video, this is pretty tough. I'm going to just give you a kind of a pointer. So what I did, all of this has been removed, and these are pieces of delaminated plywood, one layer. So what I did, I just went through with my utility knife, and I just simply cut and cut until I got to an area where I thought it was safe. Then I would use my putty knife, and you can see here, can't get any lift. There's some lift. That means it's bad. So what I do is I just keep lifting until it stops lifting, and then you'll know you've finally got an area. And then you could what I did is I scored along the keelson, got that out of there, and then I keep lifting, and I'm pretty happy. Got the shellac out of here. If you ever see this black shiny stuff between lumber, that's shellac, which is an old furniture finish they used to use for, oh, you can put bungs in your deck, or obviously joints between wood on interior and exterior. Very crunchy, hard, but once it breaks, it breaks. So it's pretty easy to get out once you get it out. But yeah, so what I'm going to do is just keep working my way up. I think I've finally reached an area where this will just get cut. And then I'll just go ahead and put in my epoxy filler, thickened epoxy, just to get that all smoothed out and bonded. I'm going to use a TotalBoat Epoxy with its resin with hardener, and then I'm going to use the milled fibers to give it some strength, because it'll have fiberglass in it, but not the cloth that you typically see. And if I like how that looks, I'll go ahead and just go that route. Otherwise, I might put a small section in of glass just to keep it together. So options are there. I'll see what I do. So now I have the area cleaned up and ready to go. And because an oscillating sander will not fit into this space, I use my really handy Makita brand. I think it's an 1.25 inches, maybe an inch and a quarter sander. And what this is just a tiny belt sander. It allows you multiple speeds, but to get into areas like this. And what you typically have a vacuum, and I will turn the vacuum on when I do it, but I don't want to do it now because of the sound, and I wear a respirator because there's no collection source. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this butt joint because that's where the keelson goes in. But these areas are all going to get faired down into a flat surface, so that not only my resin but my cloth that I might lay in there will have a seamless transition, so there won't be any more steps. And if you leave steps in a fiberglass application with cloth, or even matte, it will leave gaps in the hard right angle underneath that step. So what I want to do is make that smooth, and then go ahead and get that ready for whatever I decide to do. And then it should be perfect. So I'm going to get back to work. So I have my sanding done, and I've dished out all the holes and areas of rot that I want fixed. So by dishing out, I mean you come in and you go round and round, bringing that gradually out in all areas. I do a 6-inch to 1 because this is such a thin hull. There's a limit, but also at least 6 inches, because you're trying to spread the load of that new hole out among the rest of the good wood, and it'll also help you with the fairing process. So out here it'll be a very thin patch. Here it'll be deep. So what I'm going to do is put some I'm going to go ahead and put my resin unthickened on, and then it will soak in. I will then put on thickened epoxy, which is the resin with some chopped up fiberglass fibers in it, and then I will go ahead and put a patch, most likely, depending on the depth of some of these. Some of these are deep, some of them are not. So there's probably going to be a little of each. And then I will start out with a big patch, which goes my 6 inches, and then I slowly get smaller. So each one of these is really a pattern of what the cloth I want to make will be when I'll pre-cut those and get those ready. And then we'll polish it off with a coat of clear resin on top and soak that fiber, and then get the bubbles out and just make it as smooth as I can before I do the fairing. Each one of these has tape on the bottom of the boat as well, so that the resin won't leak through onto your shop floor. So marked each with blue tape so I don't forget where they are, because some of them are minor. Here's one that it's along a seam in the original plywood that was laid up with glue. So I'm going to fill that with just thickened epoxy and just like a fairing compound hose, but I want to give it some strength because that's not good. So I'm going to get my stuff mixed up. I'm ready to put the unthickened epoxy on the areas of repair so that it can soak in and bring the resin volume to the surface. It means it's soaked in, and then when it gets to a saturation point, it's there. You can put either your unsaturated fiber down, mat, cloth, and then it'll stick to it. And if you put enough in, you could soak it from the bottom up, which some people that's all they do. I try to do that, but without floating it. If you float it, you've created a gap under your cloth, and the resin is there, yes, but it's an unreinforced resin, which is not good. Resin is glue. It's not meant to hold anything structurally. It's just to help keep the cloth in place, which is the structure. So I use TotalBoat Epoxy. I use the regular traditional, they call it. It's a 5-to-1. I've used TotalBoat a lot. I've used West system is just as good. I have never had issues with either one. So I'm a fan of both. This one's a little bit cheaper, and I wanted to try it on another boat I was working on, so I thought I'll try it on one of my boats. Very happy with it, so I stuck with it. What I'll do is mix my resin. So a lot of it is how big is the job. So I usually do 1 cup like this, and then I'll do my saturation. I might, I'll put 1 in, 1 and 1. These are graduated, so you don't have to do 1 and 1. You don't have to do any measuring or weighing. And it's just part of it is just experience. And in this case, it's not a big deal. If you make too much, like maybe I put 4 pumps in and it's too much clear resin, unthickened, I still have to go back and put the thickened in, which in this case, I use a TotalBoat, it's called milled glass fiber. So instead of having a cloth piece or a mat, it's been milled or ground up, so it goes well into your resin, and it allows you to mix it and becomes structurally quite strong. I use it when I put things together like wood to wood joints. You can use it for wood to steel, steel to steel, plastic to plastic, glass to glass. So it works for a lot of different applications. I'm going to use it not only for a little bit of strength, but it will be a filler. It's going to fill those undulations and gaps in that step area of the stem, but it also really fills in nice in the areas of the wood that, it's not completely smooth and the cloth is. So you have to have something to kind of take up that space. So I'll do the soaking piece first, and then I'll come back and I'll thicken up what's left because it still has some open time. It's not going to, get hard on me. And then I'll go back and I'll put my tiny little pieces of fiberglass on to make the strength. So let's do that. When it comes to epoxy, it's a chemical and it's harsh. It's sticky and it'll irritate your skin. So I always use at least, I use 7 mil. I find 5 mil plastic to be way too thin, and I'm using the extra large, which is always good. They don't rip. You couldn't put multiple layers of gloves on, so when you get sticky, you just pull one off and bam, you're into a new set. Good idea. I put brand new pumps on these. I was having trouble with the draw, so I ended up getting new pumps, and I've already primed them, and I always have a cup. It's a priming cup. It also makes a great place for the stuff to drip. Now these are really good, and I don't have much drip, but you should always have this on your bench with a drip cup. Let it go in there, it'll mix, and you're done. So with mixing epoxy, it's just one pump of each. you know, and I'm sure West System probably invented this, but it's just one pump and you're done, of both. And even though that's not very much, I know from experience that I'm going to need more. I'm going to do 2. And remember, you can always go make some more. This is not a big deal. So 120, and it's stirs. So what I do is I always make sure I'm getting the sides. I'm using a small cup, so it's not too hard. But you want to just mix that like a good cake recipe or frosting. Get it thoroughly done. It'll turn a little bit of a yellow, just a slight little yellow, and that way you know you're there. But you know, the 120 is a good safe measure. I've never had trouble. So I've got that ready. One thing I will point out, when I go to put the fibers in, I'm going to use a mask. And it's like half and half of the YouTube restore instructors use a mask, and some don't. They're next to a draw fan or an exhaust fan, which I just put it on. It's milled fiber, it gets into your lungs, not good. So isn't any different than grinding on a boat, a fiberglass boat. I'm not going to do that either. So I always put my respirator on. And then with this epoxy, I really don't find a need for a vapor respirator. It's not, it doesn't smell hardly at all. It's very user friendly. So I think that is part of the reason why it's so popular. And with anything, epoxy it's always a super safe option. It's expensive, yes, super safe option though. So I like those odds. So let's go over to the boat. So the first thing to do, you can see I have a 6-inch ruler, and I put my tape at 6 inches. So there's my circle. So what I'm going to do, you just take your resin. This is a chip brush, super cheap. You get these, and you just move it around. And what you're trying to do, again, is soak in the resin into the area that is going to receive the glass. And this will allow the wood to do any soaking up it's going to do it now, and not when your cloth is on there, essentially starving it, which means you've now made it really hard for your cloth to do its job because you've starved it of anything. So not only are you putting glass onto a kind of a dry piece, you want it to be on this sticky part, which will hold it in. You'll see some draw up through the cloth, which is great. It means you've got a good soak going on, and then you can add on top again with the brush and then roll it out. Or as you'll see, I can pull out the bubbles. So I'm going to go prep all these areas and then get ready to do some glassing. So during the dry out process, I wanted to show you what was happening that you have to make sure it doesn't happen. So you're all wetted out, and you see this. That is a dry area. That's where the wood is dry enough that it is drawing out the resin, drawing it in, and you have to make sure you go back, cover that again. So I've got my 6-inch circle from the core. Right here especially, you can see this is an old patch for some filler that's good. It's just, it's dry. So I want to make sure I have all of that really nice and saturated. You can see different areas. You can do a cross grain if you want. You know, you're just trying to fill it, which like filler stain or anything, that's a good idea. And you can stroke it back. And I'm just going to keep doing that all over the boat until they're not dry. And then I know that my cloth or my fiberglass, I'm going to use matte. I'm going for kind of a finer finish. And structurally, if I have any issues below maybe under, I will go ahead and do that. But there's not enough really bad depth hole issues where I think to like 1708 or something thicker was necessary. I'm going to do my cloth, or I'm sorry, my mat, and just build it up really well, and I think that'll be fine. So I'm going to keep working. Now that my patches are saturated, I'm going to go ahead and do the, I've got some extra here, which is just about right for that little patch. This first one I'm going to show you. Put my respirator on, do the fibers. Again, it's kind of a, you have to kind of just look for the peanut butter consistency. I know I do. This case may be a little wetter because it's not holding wood together, maybe dripping onto something. I might go for a little less, like maybe, I don't know, jam, something even a little looser, like syrup maybe, just so that I know that it's filling the gap, but also not so thick that it's not, doing its job. So shoot for peanut butter consistency most of the time, and you'll be happy. So I'm going to do that right now. So what you have is your resin and then your glass, and then you start doing this. Remember, this filling compound is not meant to be filler. It's not supposed to be soaking into the resin as much either, so you need to have it a little bit thicker because I'm trying to fill in gaps. So I'm going to put in a little more. And again, you can't screw this up. You make it too thick, put in more resin. Not a big deal. So now I'm kind of getting to that thick syrup, which is not bad. Again, the cloth is going to be in there. This will level out as the cloth gets pushed down, so you're just filling gaps. I'm going to go with this. Now I'm going to go over and do it on the boat. So now I'm ready to put my patch on. And like I said, I'm going to use chop strand mat, which is really, really in multiple directions, really strong. On a glass boat that's a little bit thicker, I think I'd be a little more, I'd lean towards like 1708 cloth, which is a biaxial as well. This, I am for the most part spreading the load, trying to get the strength back out into the perimeter. I filled this hole with chopped strand fiber and resin, confident that this is going to work. You start out with the big patch. Some people will start out with a small patch, fill that area and come up. A lot of people that I follow talk about spread the strength immediately out over the patch and get it out there. So if the patch ever fails, yeah, you're going to take it all. But I mean, I've done it both ways. Never had trouble either way. So as you can see, my thickened epoxy is here. So I've got it there. It's filled the gap. The resin that I put down originally is now holding my cloth. I've mixed up a brand new batch of unthickened, and I'm just gonna, I'm a patter. This one, because of the issues with volume, you can go ahead and just move it with your brush. You can spread it out. And this is where you can start seeing volume needs that you can use throughout the boat. Another good thing too is don't worry about pulling these edges into a ragged look. This is probably best right here. This will help your patch move into the rest of the boat. It's just a better way to ferret that edge. So don't worry about pulling this a little bit. Gets that nice and tight. I'm going to have to build up or make some more resin, but you can see the soak is starting. And here's my hole. So there's a depression here. It's soaking up because it's got lots of that thickened epoxy in it. So I'm going to mix up some more and make that adjustment in my rest of my batches so that I know I need probably 4 pumps per patch. And that way, if you go away and have lunch or something, you can always just come back and know 4 works. And I'm going to, keep an eye on this so I don't float it. The last thing you want is too much resin or not enough. You want a good mix. And this is floating a little bit. It's almost too wet. This is perfect. You see that it's working. You can do it with a brush. You can also use a roller. So I'm going to make up some more resin, and then I'll start making patches and we'll fill that in. Patch number 1 is saturated. You can see that it's all dark, but it's not shiny. Here's a little bit here. It's not floating. Floating is bad. So then you're ready to do concentric, smaller circles. So I use these. These are awesome. I'll put the link down below on where to buy these. You can use the traditional fiberglass scissors if you want, but why? So I have this circle. Now I'm going to make another one. And I just want to make it slightly smaller. So I'm going to take off the corners first. Don't throw away your extra, because you can always use that for the smaller one yet. So a little too big. I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. Again, you're not going to waste anything. You can always use this for the smaller patch or small repair job. So you can see it's a little bit smaller. Take these corners off just because I'm being picky. And then I'm going to fray these edges a little bit more than I did on the first one. So there you go, concentrically smaller. Go ahead and just rub these corners, or I'm sorry, the edge, and make that a little bit more ragged. And that will help that patch just fit better, and also fare better. You don't want to pull it too hard, but just enough. So you've got a good coat of glass or resin already. So now you can go ahead and put the patch on. Some people even spread resin with their hands with these gloves. So, you know, it just depends on what works for you. So now I know it's stuck. Some people will do 4 patches on their bench with a piece of plastic and do a pre-patch. Just you bring it over with a piece of plastic and just throw it on. You can do that. Sometimes you do that when you're doing something that's upside down, because it's just so hard to keep it, from falling off. And then they put on what's called peel ply, which is a kind of a nylon that you put over the whole thing, the whole patch, and with resin on it, and it helps to not only helps the resin to harden, cure, but it also leaves a smooth surface when you pull that off. When it's dry, you can literally pull it off and have a really nice surface. So peel ply is an option. You know, you got to buy that. It's an extra piece. I think that's great if you're doing something that's going to show. This will not. And don't worry about these ragged pieces. These will all come off with the sander. And I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to do another one and another one. I'm going to do 4. And we'll have a nice patch when I get all done. So here we are at the last patch. I decided to do an extra one. I wanted to do one more little one. So I've got 4 saturated. And I've got my one here. Remember, there's thickened epoxy under it. So there's kind of a lake under there that is going to cure itself. It's got fibers in it, but I want to try not to push into the middle too much. Just kind of, and there's going to be a little depression. That's okay. You could even put maybe one more little guy in there if you wanted to. Just in the middle. So we got 6 total. Now that I've got that all, make sure that 5th one is all saturated. And I'm going to put that in there. Remember, this is going to get painted, so we can put fairing compound in there. I hope not to put too much in, because, you know, fairing compound is for surfaces to look nice, not for. I want to make sure I don't put too much in there. So that's done. And you can see we started out with a hole this big. And this is what you have to do to make sure that you spread the strength of the new patch into good areas, but also help with that fairing that will come. Yeah, and this is going to look ugly. There's going to be, several on the bottom of this boat. But, we're here, we might as well fix it, and then it's going to get painted, and almost all of the bottom interior is covered by floor and deck. So these are structurally safe repairs that can be covered up really well with paint and won't be seen, but we'll always know that they were done well and happy boating. So I'm going to do the rest of the patches and same manner, different sizes obviously, but just the same procedure. So for the last patch, I want to show you how to do a pre-layup on your bench on a piece of plastic that can go on 4 layers deep right onto the boat. So what I do is I get the plastic wet and I put on the smallest patch because this will be the top when you're done. So here's my small patch because I'm going to finish small. You do the same process. You wet it out just like you would on the boat, looking for dry spots. And what you're doing is you're working your way up from tiny to larger. So that's all wet. And then the next big one. Remember I say you can put this down with your fingers and sometimes you get almost enough there. That means you're not floating the fiberglass, in this case matte, on top of too much resin. And your fingers are going to get full of resin on this. It's inevitable. You can be neat when you're doing it on the boat, but this, you're in it. You're into the work. So I'm only going to do 4 on this because it's a small patch. I just wanted to work on that while I had the resin and stuff out. And that back of the boat is going to get a lot of work at the end when we go to put the transom back on. There's going to be a lot of repairs to that edge. Dead. We're going to use a lot of glass. We're going to paint the boat all the way to the deck. So all of the repairs that I'm doing, not only inside and outside, but all the way around the shear to the deck, is going to have a paint coat. It's going to be a white bottom, black sides with a gold boot line or water line in some cases, and then we're going to roll that black up on top of the deck onto the shear, and then we're going to put in a beautiful red mahogany deck with white lines. So it's going to look nice. So here you go. You got your patch, and you can peel it. You have to be kind of careful. Grab each layer as you go. There we go. And then I get my last piece. So it's all right there. And then I just take this bottom big side down and I put my patch in place. So at the boat, I put the patch down. I'm going to want to work it just like I would if it was on there all along. And look for those dry spots. You can see this 6:1 is kind of short because I ran out of boat. But this is going to get a lot of work later. We work on the edge of this hole as we prep for the transom reinstall. And there you go. So, less time on your knees, bending over, however you want to look at it. It's a good way to do it. So that's it for patches. If you remember, I went ahead and I talked about with this repair, I wetted it out, and then I went ahead and put in thickened epoxy to tie that seam, or it's where the individual pieces of thin veneer plywood were laid in and glued, so it had I wouldn't say a crack as much as it just had an opening. I want to make sure that was secure, keep water out. So I went ahead, wetted it out, put in the thickened epoxy, smoothed it out with a brush, and now I'll just let that I'll let that cure up like a patch, and then I'll fair it just like the other ones. Here is the boat all patched up. I did the stem at the end. You see there. One thing I will say is that I was on the fence about whether to put Smith's penetrating epoxy down before I did the patches. In the past, I haven't had repairs on a molded plywood boat this major, but I would say that I did saturate the plywood quite a bit with the unthickened epoxy to the point where I wouldn't say it's penetrating to the point where Smith's might, but it was definitely in there. So I think I've given that first or second coat, I should layer of plywood, a good bonding surface. I know it probably got through the plywood at least down one. So in the future, I probably would do the whole boat inside first and then do it. That way you know you've got a really good epoxy sealer penetrator in there. That said, at the end, I did that technique on the the end of the keel and the beginning of the stem. That I did do. I did notice the delamination there was worse than on the rest of the boat. I think it's because it just sat there and never pooled. Well, it pooled there and didn't roll into the bilge. Maybe the other end areas did. So that I did hit with Smith's first with 3 coats, and then I went ahead and put in the epoxy to wet it. Just one layer of the matte with a coat of thickened epoxy under that for some of the gaps, and went ahead and put the matte on top, and then saturated that out to the point where I like it. That area has a lot of joints, even though they're factory made. I wanted to make sure they had a lot of epoxy down in that area. And even though it looks like I might have a few bubbles there where some of the transitions took place, I will grind those out with my little 1 1/4 Makita sander and get those bubbles out before I put any fairing compound, and then obviously hit it with Smiths. The whole boat will get Smiths on it now, as I've got the sanding done and fair out these patches, and it'll be a lot smoother, so the penetrating epoxy will go on. So that's the end of that process. So that concludes today's video. Thank you for tuning in. If you're enjoying the series and would like to keep up to date on the newest videos that are dropped on Wednesday mornings, please hit the subscribe button. If you're liking it to the point where you like it, please hit the like button. That's always nice to see some positive feedback. And of course, as always, if you ever have any comments or questions, please put those below and I will do my best to address them. Always enjoy having people ask questions or suggest things that maybe I hadn't thought of, and so that way we can all learn together. So until next time, take care.